I've got a lot of experience in figuring out how to solve problems, making the solutions work, and then moving on to the next one. I've got a lot of experience in not taking 10 years to solve a 10-minute problem. So if it's time for action, I think I have experience that counts. If there's more time for gridlock and talk and finger pointing, I'm the wrong man.
President Bush, the question goes to you. You have 2 minutes. And the question is this: are there important issues of character separating you from these other two men?
I think the American people should be the judge of that. I think character is a very important question. I said something the other day where I was accused of being like Joe McCarthy, because I questioned, I put it this way, I think it's wrong to demonstrate against your own country or organize demonstrations against your own country in foreign soil. I just think it's wrong. That maybe they say, well, it's a youthful indiscretion. I was 19 or 20 flying off an aircraft carrier, and that shaped me to be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And I'm sorry, but demonstrating, it's not a question of patriotism, it's a question of character and judgment. They get on me, Bill's gotten on me about read my lips, and when I make a mistake, I'll admit it. But he has not admitted a mistake, and I just find it impossible to understand how an American can demonstrate against his own country in a foreign land, organizing demonstrations against it, when young men are held prisoner in Hanoi or kids out of the ghetto were drafted. Some say, well, you're a little old-fashioned. Maybe I am, but I just don't think that's right. Now, whether it's character or judgment, whatever it is, I have a big difference here on this issue. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I couldn't do that. And I don't think most Americans could do that. And they all say, well, it was a long time ago. Well, let's admit it then. Say, I made a terrible mistake. How could you be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and have some kid say, when you have to make a tough decision, as I did in Panama or in Kuwait, and then have some kid jump up and say, well, I'm not going to go. The Commander-in-Chief was organizing demonstrations halfway around the world during another era. So there are differences, but that's about the main area where I think we have a difference. I don't know about, we'll talk about that a little with Ross here in a bit.
Mr. Perot, you have 1 minute.
I think American people will make their own decisions on character. And at a time when we have work to do and we need action, I think they need to clearly understand the backgrounds of each person. I think the press can play a huge role in making sure that the backgrounds are clearly presented in an objective way. Then make a decision. Certainly anyone in the White House should have the character to be there. But I think it's very important to measure when and where things occurred. Did they occur when you were a young person in your formative years, or did they occur while you were a senior official in the federal government? When you're a senior official in the federal government spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, and you're a mature individual, and you make a mistake, then that was on our ticket. If you make it as a young man, time passes. So I would say just, look at all three of us, decide who you think will do the job, pick that person in November, because believe me, as I've said before, the party's over and it's time for the cleanup crew. And we do have to have change, and people who never take responsibility for anything when it happens on their watch, and people who are in charge.
Your time
is up.
Time is up.
More later.
More. Governor Clinton, you have 1 minute.
Ross gave a good answer, but I've got to respond directly to Mr. Bush. You have questioned my patriotism. You even brought some right-wing congressmen into the White House to plot how to attack me for going to Russia in 1969, 1970, when over 50,000 other Americans did. Now, I honor your service in World War II. I honor Mr. Perot's service in uniform and the service of every man and woman who ever served, including Admiral Crowell, who was your chairman of the Joint Chiefs and who's supporting me. But when Joe McCarthy went around this country attacking people's patriotism, he was wrong. He was wrong. And a senator from Connecticut stood up to him named Prescott Bush. Your father was right to stand up to Joe McCarthy. You were wrong to attack my patriotism. I was opposed to the war, but I love my country. And we need a president who will bring this country together, not divide it. We've had enough division. I want to lead a unified country.
All right, we move now to the subject of taxes and spending. The question goes to Governor Clinton for a 2-minute answer. It will be asked by Ann Compton.
Governor Clinton, can you lock in a level here tonight on where middle-income families can be guaranteed a tax cut, or at the very least, at what income level they can be guaranteed no tax increase?
The tax increase I have proposed triggers in at family incomes of $200,000 and above. Those are the people who in the 1980s had their incomes go up while their taxes went down. Middle-class people, defined as people with incomes of $52,000 and down, had their incomes go down while their taxes went up in the Reagan-Bush years because of 6 increases in the payroll taxes. So that is where my income limit would trigger.
So there will be no tax increases below
Right.
$200,000.
My plan, notwithstanding my opponent's ad, my plan triggers in at gross incomes, family incomes of $200,000 and above. Then we want to give modest middle-class tax relief to restore some fairness, especially to middle-class people with families with incomes of under $60,000. In addition to that, the money that I raise from upper-income people and from asking foreign corporations just to pay the same income on their income earned in America that American corporations do will be used to give incentives back to upper-income people. I want to give people permanent incentives, an investment tax credit like President Kennedy and the Congress inaugurated in the early 60s to get industry moving again, a research and development tax credit, a low-income housing tax credit, a long-term capital gains proposal for new business and business expansions. We've got to have no more trickle down. We don't need across-the-board tax cuts for the wealthy for nothing. We need to say, here's your tax incentive if you create American jobs the old-fashioned way. I'd like to create more millionaires than were created under Mr. Bush and Mr. Reagan, but I don't want to have 4 years where we have no growth in the private sector, and that's what's happened in the last 4 years. We're down 35,000 jobs in the private sector. We need to invest and grow, and that's what I want to do.
President Bush, 1 minute, sir.
Well, I have to correct one thing. I didn't question the man's patriotism. I questioned his judgment and his character. What he did in Moscow, that's fine. Let him explain it. He did. I accept that. What I don't accept is demonstrating and organizing demonstrations in a foreign country when your country's at war. I'm sorry, I cannot accept that. In terms of this one on taxes, spells out the biggest difference between us. I do not believe we need to go back to the Mondale proposals or the Dukakis proposals of tax and spend. Governor Clinton says 200,000, but he also says he wants to raise 150 billion. The taxing people over 200,000 will not get you 150 billion. And then when you add in his other spending proposals, regrettably, you end up socking it to the working man. That old adage that they use, we're going to soak the rich. We're going to soak the rich. It always ends up being the poor cab driver or the working man that ends up paying the bill. And so I just have a different approach. I believe the way to get the deficit down is to control the growth of mandatory spending programs and not raise taxes on the American people. We got a big difference there.
Mr. Perot, 1 minute.
We've got to have a growing, expanding job base to give us a growing, expanding tax base. Right now, we have a flat to deteriorating job base, and where it appears to be growing, it's minimum wage jobs. So we've got to really rebuild our job base. That's going to take money for infrastructure investment to do that. Our foreign competitors are doing it. We're not. We cannot pay off the $4 trillion debt, balance the budget, and have the industries of the future and the high-paying jobs in this country without having the revenue. We're going to go through a period of shared sacrifice. There's one challenge. It's got to be fair. We've created a mess, don't have much to show for it, and we have got to fix it. And that's about all I can say in a minute.
Okay. Next question goes to President Bush for a 2-minute answer, and it will be asked by Sandy Van Oker.
Mr. President, this past week, your Secretary of the Army, Michael Stone, said he had no plans to abide by a congressional mandate to cut U.S. forces in Europe from 150 to 100,000 by the end of September 1996. Now, why, almost 50 years after the end of World War II, and with the total collapse of the Soviet Union, should American taxpayers be taxed to support armies in Europe when the European